Welcome to the HCI family of podcasts. We're your source for personal, professional, and organizational growth and development. We share our own original research, explore industry trends, and interview executives and thought leaders from across the globe. Join us for practitioner-oriented content around all things leadership, HR, talent management, organizational development, and change management. Maximize your personal and organizational potential with the HCI family of podcasts. Carla Fowler, welcome to the conversation today.
Thanks, John. I'm excited to be here.
It is a real pleasure to be with you. You're joining us from Arizona. I'm south of Salt Lake City in Utah. And today we're going to be talking about mastering performance improvement. I love this topic because I think we all long for maximum top premium performance, right? We want to maximize our potential. We want individually to be able to achieve our potential, but we want to help our teams to achieve their potential as well. Yet we have all of these broken performance management systems that are out there. The kind of classic performance appraisal, year-end performance appraisal that everyone knows doesn't work. We have all of these performance management systems that are clunky, that really don't work. And the question is, well, what do we do? Like, how do we replace them? We can't just not do anything. We have to be able to help people improve their performance. But what does that look like in the modern age, in the modern world of work? What does that look like as things are so rapidly shifting and changing, and the iterative cycle of technological advancement is so rapid, it's exponentially fast how rapidly things are changing and how quickly we need to be able to adapt. So what does that look like to be able to master performance improvement in this kind of an environment? It's totally different today than it was even a generation ago, right? So this is what we're going to try to unpack and explore together today. As we get started, I wanted to share Carla's bio with everybody. Dr. Carla Fowler is an MD, PhD, and elite executive coach. For the last decade, she has been a secret weapon for scores of CEOs, entrepreneurs, and other senior leaders. Carla's unique approach combines the latest research from performance science with timeless best practices to help top performers level up and achieve their goals. I could share a whole lot more about Carla's background, but Carla, I'm going to pause there. Anything you would like to highlight by way of your background or personal context before we dive on in?
I think the one most important thing is that a lot of people ask me, like, hey, so you took a academic medicine training pathway. Now for the past 12 years, you have been doing performance coaching. What's the story there? And we won't go into the nitty gritty of it. But I think one important thing to know about me is that I have been obsessed with performance since like fifth grade, and not in some odd prodigy way. Like literally, like in fifth grade, started thinking about things like, who wins the track meet and why? Or even like within social settings, right? The kind of hierarchies we have when you are in middle school, for example, like, well, what gives someone social savvy? Why? Like if someone has influence at that point in time, why is that? And this has been a thread throughout my life. I've loved challenging environments because I think one of the best ways to research things is get some firsthand data, like put yourself in situations, and then you also get secondhand data. So you get the data about how you feel, what's working for you, what's not. But you also get to watch everybody else in the arena and start to say, who's doing what? Who's performing at a high level, who's being recognized for that, how is it being measured? Are there informal measures as well as like the spoken measures? And so this has been like a theme for me for a very long time. Ultimately, it led me to start a practice outside of medicine as opposed to like a true medical practice. But that's sort of the context for, why talk about this, why think about this. So.
Yeah, interesting. Well, and I can totally see that from a physical performance standpoint. I forget what's that term, that physical medical term, kinesiology, something like that.
Yeah, that's a great term.
Yeah, so I could totally see that. Like I think athletes are constantly thinking about how do we maximize to be able to perform at higher levels. Just yesterday, I was watching with my daughter. I was watching a wild card NFL playoff game, right? And that everyone is trying to figure out, like, how do we maximize our performance at the highest peak level of competition, right? And that's sports. Any physical athlete, is trying to figure that out. And in the workplace, though, we're trying to do the same thing. It's not necessarily always physical, but intellectually, right? Creatively, in terms of innovation, in terms of maximizing our efficiencies and all of those types of things. Like we're still trying to figure out how to maximize performance, and there are limitations to the human body, to the human brain, to what we can
Well
accomplish. And
said.
so understanding, it makes, I guess what I'm saying is it makes perfect sense to me, how someone with your type of background could land in this space, because understanding the limitations of humans and the human body and the human brain makes perfect sense. And then taking it to the next level of like, practically, what does that mean for individuals, for teams, for
Exactly.
organizations, right?
Yeah. And I think one of the first places we could even start is this idea of if we think about performance as something that is measured about us, right? Like that our organization is demanding from us or measuring us for, that's one particular context. And I think you led into that perfectly as you opened, which is, yeah, we have a lot of ways to, systems, processes we put in place, end of year review, all of that.
Hmm.
But in some ways, I always came at performance from a standpoint of performance is something like I want for myself.
Hmm.
And I actually think, it could be rightly said, like, okay, that's fine. Carla, you were like a type A, whatever kind of person going through your career. But I actually have talked with hundreds of people. And what I know is that all of us have desires around like, what is our potential? Are we meeting it? And also that having challenges in front of us and meeting those challenges and seeing ourselves grow and achieve more than we might have in the past is a fundamental piece of our sense of self-efficacy, and that is important. And so often, rather than start with what's the device in the workplace, when I'm coaching, I'm typically coaching leaders, but we start to help them learn how to think about performance for themselves first, and also like how to think about it from their teams. Like sometimes people will ask me, Carla, what's the performance management tool? And I'm like, well, let's actually just take a step back and think about what are some of the fundamental units or like principles or ways we could approach performance, and how you could have conversations about those things, knowing that
Hmm.
often a one-on-one connected human conversation is one of the most effective ways to start to like move, change, and influence. And it's through relationship as opposed to a tech tool.
Let me also just reiterate, I ran off at the beginning, like all of those things, annual performance review, performance management systems. There's lots of tools that can help facilitate performance um, management within organizations. My opinion is most of that stuff doesn't work. Most of that stuff is
Yeah.
not effective. And in fact, many organizations are getting rid of that kind of stuff, right? And there's been many high profile organizations, oftentimes tech companies, that, proudly and boldly proclaim, we are done with performance management. We're done with the performance review, because rightfully they say it's garbage. And it is. Like, I mean, the traditional annual performance review is garbage. It doesn't do anything. It only wastes people's time. It demotivates. It doesn't improve performance. It only is uncomfortable for people and demotivating, right? But the question is, do they really not do anything related to performance? Of course not. That's crazy. Like, that's silly. Of course, there's still stuff related to performance within those organizations. They're just getting rid of the traditional stuff, right?
Right.
So there's still going to be all sorts of other types of stuff that they're going to do. And what are those other things? What they're doing is they're putting more onus on individuals for
Mm-hmm.
individual ownership over their own performance progression and development. They're leaning more into more individualized coaching and mentoring, types of forms of development, especially for younger early career professionals. They're leaning into those forms of performance management and mastering performance and improvement, rather than these more formal, structured, clunky, less very
Right.
proven less effective forms, right?
Yeah, and which I think is a good direction to be going in. And so yeah, I hear you. Like in your agreement of that, of like getting away from some of these clunky tools. And so then the interesting thing, and this of course is what I do day in and day out as a coach, but now you have a lot of people who are trying to lead these conversations and think through, but also maybe without structure. And
Yeah.
so that brings us sort of to the topic of our conversation, which is a little bit, well, how could we think about performance and what are some useful things to be thinking about? Like if we broke it down into some principles, that is, if you are a leader, having developmental conversations with your team, or even if you're a leader saying, hey, I need, as we go up the chain, there's less and less people concerned with our development because we are mostly, now you're in the role of, no, you develop your team, but there's often less of that support at the top. But so you have to think about your own performance as a leader as well and how to kind of think through that. One of the things when I started coaching was I thought it was important to have some like backbone for it. And I really wanted to tap into performance science because I'm trained as a scientist and I really wanted to say, well, okay, it is a noisy field. There's lots of contributors. And of course, it gets way down into the weeds. And we want this to be practical, if you're actually going to take this
Hmm.
out and use it with people. And so the first thing I did is I was designing almost like my coaching operating system or my way of thinking about working with people in performance. I had to define, like, well, how do I want to break down performance in a way that we could then use it to approach problems or challenges that come up, but help people have a number of different ways to approach it. And in a way that was simple enough, they could actually use it independent of me. And so the first thing I did was say, well, performance science, and even performance in general, I think has about 4 buckets. So you could think of it as there is a sort of clarity or strategy bucket. You could
Hmm.
think of this as saying, you're not going to do everything. And your edge in performance is always about where you choose to spend your time. So, how potently you decide what activities, whether it's your team is going to do or that you are going to do as an individual. First bucket, strategy. Second bucket is really about how well you can execute or your team can execute on whatever those right things are, those most important things you're going to do. And that has a lot to do with both, you could say the productivity movement falls in that category, but
Hmm.
also team dynamics, systems, processes, some of those things. So second bucket, execution. Third bucket, you could think about as like the mindset slash psychology elements of doing anything. So it's how motivated is your team? How confident do you feel as you're giving that, pitch, for example? And that there's a lot of how we feel about what's going on that matters a lot to how we actually perform. So that's third bucket is sort of mindset or the psychology of it. And then the fourth bucket is actually about our biology, our physiology. And that's to say that in the background of all of these things that feel a little more controllable potentially, there's actually what is your internal milieu? Are you in fight or flight mode all the time? Are you getting enough sleep? Do you have some techniques to help yourself sort of calm and not always be at the peak of stress? Like stress is not necessarily bad, but we do know if there isn't sort of a nice curve to it where you get stress and then recovery, that's challenging. But we know what our biology is doing affects everything from decision making to how well we can like relate to another person. So fourth bucket's biology. And so when I think about working with people around performance, we can often say, like, where would be the right place to start? I like to start with like the sort of strategy or clarity about what's most important, like how might you want to be spending your time. But for different performance challenges that come up for people, like someone may have already identified, for example, that they need to develop their team in a particular learning area. And so maybe the approach is actually from the execution bucket to say, how do you make a learning journey for them? But like few of us are in school anymore. And so we actually have to define those developmental journeys. Like what could it look like to build more skill and knowledge about AI for your team, right? Like this is going to be a major factor in what teams need to think about and deal
Yeah.
with, right? So But I'll pause there. That is often how I start to break down for people. Like, how could you think about performance and different places to enter that cycle and either help and develop a team member or develop yourself?
Yeah, well, I think that is very helpful to think about those different separate areas, and to think about self and team members
Yeah.
in that way, because the reality is everyone is going to be in a different spot. That's one of the reasons why the traditional systems that are rigid and clunky, because the traditional systems are like annual, they're just so disconnected,
They're not
from
real.
the
They're
act.
not real time.
They're not real time. They're so disconnected from when the performance is actually happening, right? And so for all these reasons, it just doesn't really work. What you're describing though is like there's distinct reasons why performance doesn't happen.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
There's a whole range of things that can happen and it's individualized. And
Mhm.
so being able to recognize and even those four buckets, right? Those are generalized, right? Within those four
Absolutely. There's a
buckets, there's a
lot
whole bunch of
in
stuff.
each one. Yeah, totally.
But it just helps conceptually, right? To put things in buckets. But the point is like this is an individualized thing. You got to know your people, right? And you can
Mhm.
kind of put it into buckets, but then recognizing like, yeah, this is going to be an individualized approach for each person. I need to understand what their challenges are and what they need to be facing to be able to improve their performance. It needs to be real time. It has to like if you see a problem, it needs to be addressed, or some great performance. It needs to be addressed immediately. If you see a problem, it needs to be addressed
Yeah.
immediately. That's like when, again, I mentioned watching an NFL playoff game yesterday. Like in sports, you have immediate feedback, right? That's the difference
Yes.
oftentimes between like athletics and the workplace. In
Hmm.
sports and athletics, you usually have immediate feedback on what's happening and whether it worked or whether it didn't work. And in the workplace, you don't always have that. And in many cases, you never really get the feedback, and it's so disconnected and it's so subjective, even that you just don't even know. You have no idea whether what you did was right or wrong, or worked or didn't work, whether your boss liked what you did or didn't like what you did, or whatever. And so it's just so hard to even know if you're performing well or not. Whether,
Hmm.
and even if you're not, what do you need to do to improve? These are really hard questions to answer. And so connecting to, more real-time, immediate feedback to what is occurring and understanding that, yes, there are very distinct types of performance issues that can occur
Hmm.
that I can address. I think that's very, very powerful.
Yeah. And I like your point about the importance of feedback and also like real time feedback. And I 100% agree that sports, you know who won the track meet. It's usually pretty clear, or who won the football game. And it is one of the challenging things when you start to get into workplace environments. You could argue that to some degree, there are fields like sales where there are many
Mhm.
more numbers associated with performance in
Sure.
that area. And as a result, it does make it easier to know. But then you also have to ask yourself, like, well, where did the leads come from? How is the marketing department involved in that? There's a lot. And so one of the other interesting things about performance that I think about, and I bring this up because it is often missed, is in fields where things are harder to measure, there's another piece besides just our results that starts to matter a lot in performance. And I bring this up just because it's important to think about, which is how aware our network is of our performance
Mm.
matters a lot when it's
Yeah.
harder to measure. In things that
Yeah.
are obvious to measure, um, generally your success goes along with your results. But
Mhm.
in the workplace, for example, I have talked with a number of people who are like, well, I'm working really hard. I think I'm producing great results, but I don't know that I'm seeing, the promotion cycle or the attention. Like I feel like my good work should speak for itself, and I'm not a person who likes to be all self-promotional. And so this is something that's another piece of performance that is a mistake we often make. And it is made in such a good-hearted way because again, there are people who are busy you know, trying to be overly braggy or self-promotional. But one of the things that's important is when we have value to produce and we're really performing at a high level in an organization, it's actually important to help people know because that allows them to get more value from us, to use us in new ways.
Yeah.
And so that's just, I like to flip it. It isn't about, hey, I need to promote myself. I often talk about this as, hey, you need to communicate to others so they can use, their human capital, you being a valuable asset of that, in the best way possible. And there are wonderful ways to do that without actually being like, hey, look at me. Like often it's like sharing wins from your team, highlighting their contributions, but also saying, hey, this is what this might mean for other departments. And how could we capitalize on this all together so we could all win some more, for example, is a lovely way to share your results, recognize your team, which of course is a very fundamental piece of motivating a team, is them feeling visible and recognized for their own performance. But also then being able to say, bring other people into that win and say, hey, what does this mean for us? How could we, all get more out of this? But that's a
Hmm.
common thing that gets missed in performance. So I'd love to bring that up.
And it is a conundrum. In my experience, most people who are like the most self-promotional and what some people would see as the most obnoxiously self-promotional are not the best performers. But they're obnoxiously self-promotional. And they're kind of relentless about it. And they have a certain charisma, perhaps they have a certain, salesmanship about it. And they do disproportionately get the promotions. They disproportionately get assigned to the good projects and the good clients and all of those sorts of things. And it's just the reality. Like it's the network, right? It's the old cliche, it's not what you know, it's who you know. And all of this is built upon your ability to share what you accomplish. And it's just the reality of it. And I have to admit, as more of an introvert myself, I would love for just my performance to speak for itself. I would love to just
Mhm.
accomplish stuff and for people to
Mhm.
know and recognize and then say, you did a good job here. Here's a promotion or whatever. I would love for that to always be the case. But anyone who's lived in this world for any amount of time will know that's not the case. That's not how the
Yeah.
world usually
And
works.
you are not alone, John, in that. I have absolutely felt that myself. And I think a lot of people feel that. But fortunately, we don't have to approach it the way in that obnoxious way. But we can
Yeah,
still take
and to your
advantage of
to
it.
your point, it's not an either or. It's not like you have to be this obnoxious blowhard who's constantly just making it all about you, or you have to be this mouse in the corner who never shares anything, right? It's not either or. You can totally be a person who owns your successes, who is not just endlessly self-promotional, but is adding actual meaningful value to others around you.
Mhm.
So it's not just humble bragging all over the place, but you're
Yeah.
actually adding value to people and you're complimenting your team, like you said, and you're lifting others up around you. And as you know, the natural byproduct of lifting others around you is that you're going to be lifted as well. And so when I see people like that, I am so impressed by them. Um, not because they're obnoxiously self-promotional, but because I know like that is impressive. That takes skill to lead a successful team of high performers where they trust and are committed and loyal to that person, where they are, performing at peak high levels. That doesn't just magically happen. That happens because they have a team lead who is bringing out the best in them. And and I think smart people know that, right? Like we're not
Yeah.
stupid. Like people recognize that. And so as we're trying to think about how do we find that balance, I can't answer that for you, anyone who's listening or watching. Like I can't answer that for you exactly in your context, in your business, in your team. But generally speaking, I would say, yeah, just try to seek that balance somewhere in the middle where you're adding genuine value to those around you, where you're being genuinely complimentary to those around you, where you're lifting up the people around you and performing at a high level yourself. And as you're doing that, you will get recognized, you will get noticed, and you will have opportunities to share what you're doing in meaningful ways without seeming obnoxious. So, anyways, I know it can be uncomfortable, but you got to do it.
Yeah,
Otherwise, to your point, you're going to have wasted human capital. Like you're going to be so capable,
exactly.
so much you can offer, and it's going to go unseen. It's going to be like the tree that falls in the forest and doesn't make a sound. You know, it's
Yes,
there's going to be so much
it's a
potential
great
there that never
analogy.
gets tapped, and that's sad.
Yeah. And fundamentally, like in performance, part of it, and as we want to be fully, expressing our potentials, is to lean into that edge of discomfort. It
Yeah.
is much like physical training. It is unlikely that we are going to be growing if we're not actually putting our system into some discomfort, stressing it a little bit. And so for people who are out there who are like, oh, I hate self promotion. This is a great moment, as you said. We don't know where the balance is for you, but it's to say, lean into that. Think about something that is palatable enough to you, maybe a little bit scary, but you're like, all right, I will do that at my next one on one with my skip level or my boss. Like, help them understand the value we're producing and give it a shot. Like, lean into that edge of discomfort.
Yeah. Yeah. Discomfort is always necessary for growth, for development. Um, for peak performance, you're going to have to stretch. You're going to have to. I mean, it's like exercising and building a
Yeah.
muscle. You got to break
Mm-hmm.
stuff down a little bit to rebuild it, right? And that's just the way it is. It's uncomfortable, but it's necessary.
Yeah.
Well, Carla, this has just been a super fun conversation. I know there's a whole lot more we could talk about here, but I'm also noticing the time. I need to let you go and get on with your busy day. Before we wrap things up, I wanted to give you the chance to share with the audience how they can get connected with you, find out more about your work, and then give us the final word on the topic for today.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for having me, John. This has been awesome. A great way for any audience members who want to learn more or get in touch with me. LinkedIn is a great place to follow along. So I'm often posting conversations I have about performance science and coaching, and I'm at Carla Fowler. But if you want to learn more about coaching or find the whole library of conversations I've had about performance science, that is on my website. Another great place, has a good FAQ as well. And that's at thaxa.com, THAXA.
Wonderful. Again, Carla, thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. I encourage the audience to reach out, to get connected, find out more about what Carla can do for you. Check out the resources, many wonderful things that she provides. And as always, I hope everyone can stay healthy and safe, that you can find meaning and purpose at work each and every day. And I hope you all have a great week. Thanks for joining us for this episode of the podcast. We hope you stay healthy and safe, and please join us again soon.